Welcome back to the Angle on Producer Summer Camp Series. If you're just tuning in, while our team is on a brief summer break, we will be re-releasing past episodes that highlight what it means to be an exceptional producer. By the end of summer, you'll be outfitted with a new set of producing wisdom to help you along your filmmaking journey. So, are you ready to improve your aim? This week, we bring you the high priestess of indie filmmaking, Christine Vachon. Christine is a legend who has been in the game for over 30 years and has produced some of the most impactful indie films of the era, including Kids, Still Alice, Carol, Past Lives, Zola, and you might have heard of a little film called The Brutalist that swept this past award season, or Celine Song's newest film, The Materialist. Yeah, Christine was behind both of them. Safe to say, Christine has hit the target that many producers dream of. She's been able to identify strong directors and projects back to back, and as a result, she's created a lifelong career making meaningful and memorable films that keep audiences coming back time and time again. But how does one sharpen their shot to hit that bullseye over and over again? Well, grab your bows and arrows, because Christine is going to give us a little lesson in archery and how you can hit your career targets while making movies to feel good about. Come for the lesson and stay for the airport lounge wine reviews. Christine is here to drop some wisdom. Cheers. You've already, anyone who Googles you, can find a ton about how you started, and obviously your work with Todd Haynes and everything that's kind of gotten you on the path. And so I want to just skip ahead a little bit, since that is information that is so easily Googleable, and ask, you said in your book, A Killer Life, in 2006, you called producing the best job in the world, right? So I'm curious, with over 100 films and 30 years later, do you still feel that way?
I mean, it's the best job in the world for me.
Yeah.
You know, I still, look, even during this, insane time, I feel like I was able to stay engaged, in terms of, in across the board in all different kinds of storytelling. We finished shooting, a mini series for Netflix.
Yeah. Austin,
December.
right? Yeah. Austin, yeah.
And I can't say that's it's not that much fun to shoot during COVID.
Yeah.
But I'm also very grateful that obviously that we did get to make something and got to employ a lot of people, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's still the best job for me.
Yeah. That's good. And so how has, not that we're on the other side of the pandemic, but I feel like a year after sort of everything blew up, we all seem to have a little perspective on it now. I'm curious how that last year, how maybe it redefined things for you, if it did at all, in your life as a producer and the kind of art you still want to create. I mean, you've done so much. So.
Right. That's the $1 million question, I think, is what kind of stories what kind of stories do we want to tell? What kind of stories do we want to see? Are they the same thing? There's vast swings between nobody wants to be depressed. Everything has to be happy. Don't put the pandemic in your show. No one wants to see that. And then, no, we need to process. We need to process what we just went through. I want to see things that move me. I want to see things that make me cry, that really allow me some release. And then, I want to see things that aren't about my world, possibly. I want to get out of this, these, whatever our four walls are. So I think that's a big question. I think that the sort of recalibration that's happened in terms of office space, what is that? What is that now? Are we still going to have offices? I felt like there was a palpable shift in the pandemic of we can all work from home. This is great, to, oh my God, this is terrible. I've got to get back to a place where I can separate my home from my work life, and where I can have camaraderie, where I can share ideas with a colleague who's right there, instead of having to call them or find them or what have you. So, but I do think that offices are going to be rethought in terms of what we actually use them for. What's kind of coming to the forefront maybe is what is the purpose of an office? I mean, one thing that I said to my partner, Ken Koffler, the other day when we were talking about offices was, it's really hard to mentor somebody if you can't be there with them.
Yeah.
And, it's just, we've had interns, summer interns this past summer who I never even met. And, we tried to give them as good an experience as possible. But there's something about just being able to, share space with somebody, real space, not virtual space. So that's a big question. And then of course there's shooting itself. Like, are we going to have some version of these protocols in place, for the foreseeable future? And how is that going to affect our the mechanics of set life? I mean, the big thing, of course, that I'm sure you've heard this from anyone who's shot during this, is how limited the number of people on set is or are. So, and, some directors have confessed to me that they actually like that. They actually like, they don't like wearing the mask and the face shield and the goggles. And, but they do like that the set becomes very, very small, and that there's, you're just very focused on the task at hand.
Yeah, there's an intimacy that I think is akin is akin to sort of, I would venture to say, the beginnings of most filmmakers, where you got to just be you and a sound person and a DP in a room with your actors telling a story. And I think when production is production now, how no matter how large the scope is of the story, but I can see how a lot of people who get into the game want to preserve that sense of connection with the talent. And when everybody's just hanging around eating snacks, like watching it, it creates a very different work experience. I totally get that. And I don't disagree, but as the person who does love to observe, and so much of my own knowledge that I've gained has come just from being a little sponge in these moments when I was coming up. Like, I totally get both sides of that coin. And I wonder if there's a world where you can, in the same way that we do close sets for certain very intimate scenes, I wonder if there can be different scenes that can exist, different days of filming that can be structured to allow observation, and some that just you cannot, right? It could be one way of working. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think like one of the great things about our industry is that if anybody can pivot creatively quickly and find solutions, it's us, even though it sucks and it's not comfortable. To your point, I think production right now, the added layers of stress and complication, I just don't know how it's conducive to the creative process overall. But we're in the middle of this experiment. We'll see. I think people are going to do their best, and we're going to get some really interesting art in this time that we're in. And so it's sort of our dark ages-ish. And thank God we have memes to get us through. At least we have that. But so I want to ask you, you've been now in the business for 3 decades, starting with pre-Todd Haynes, but in 1991, his first film, Poison, won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. And now it's been 30 years since you have this badge, right, that sort of launched you into the stratosphere as a producer. How, at that time, like reaching that level of success as an indie filmmaker, which one could argue is like the highest achievement right at that time. How did that inform you to start your path, not creating that internal expectation for yourself that, okay, well, I guess every other film I do has to exist at this level? Did you feel the stresses of that?
No, I mean, I was very young, and the fact was, I mean, Sundance was barely Sundance.
True.
You know what I mean? So it's not like it had been a personal dream of mine. I probably heard about the festival for the first time just like a couple years before. I actually went to Sundance with my own short film. One of the first years that it was in Park City, because before that it was actually in Sundance.
Right.
At the resort itself. And it was called either the US Film Festival or the USA Film Festival. I can't remember. It wasn't called Sundance to start with. So, you know, uh, it was very exciting. I felt much more compelled about the idea. Let me step back for a second. It's it's really important to note that that we discovered with Poison and then with Swoon, with Go Fish, we discovered that if you made a film, a queer film, and made it really for that audience without really thinking about, a straight audience, for example, and if you made it for the right amount of money, it could make its money back.
Hmm.
And that was incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
Um, and so what I was really obsessed with at that time was figuring out how to make my films in a way, how to produce films that could make their money back. And because I thought, well, then we'll get to keep making, you know?
Yeah. So it wasn't like because Sundance didn't mean what it's become to mean, right? Like the accolades that come and the spotlight that gets put on
It,
you.
it meant a lot.
Yeah.
It's just things that like now, now the arguably, most many people know what Sundance is. At the time,
Hmm.
it a lot more insidery and
Hmm.
you know, but look, I feel like Sundance has done a sort of remarkable job over the past, I don't know how old they are now,
Uh, pff,
35, 40 years
yeah,
old, something like
I
that.
think since the 70s, right? When they launched, 70s, 80s, maybe 80,
80s.
80 something. Yeah, 80 something.
Um, but they've done a remarkable job of sort of staying true to their commitment. Sometimes, people, will make fun of that, but I think it's pretty admirable.
Yeah. Yeah, so but I guess there was no feeling for you as a producer coming out the gate, and even though Sundance was a big deal, not maybe to the point that it is now a worldwide feeling phenomenon, right? But, like, you didn't feel this pressure of like, "Oh, shit, I just kind of lucked out and my first big project out the gate has all of this attention on it. I now have to keep producing at this level. How do I do that?" You just then it sounds like you just shifted to how do I create this as a sustainable model to keep telling these kind of stories that can find an audience and make money. Yeah. And I mean, I think too the other thing that is fascinating, right, is we are in an industry built on relationships. And we were sort of talking about this idea of like community and collaboration. And then you have to be around people ultimately at some point to do the job and to create these relationships. And you have enduring relationships, obviously, with Todd Haynes and Pamela Koffler. Talk about what was it about them at that time that you saw them and you said, "Those are my people?" Because I often find, especially nowadays coming up, like there's so many people and now your access is worldwide with the internet, right? So it can create this feeling of how do you find your tribe? How do you find your people in a very transient industry that is global?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, as producer looking, for directors that they want to work with, that's really just about, having good taste and being able to spot talent, early on. I mean, Todd Haynes made a film called Superstar: The Karen Carpenter
Mhm.
Story that I didn't produce, although I did help him with it, but I'm often credited with producing it. And when I saw that film, I really had an epiphany, which was,
Yeah.
that's it. That's the kind of film I want to be involved in. It's wholly original, it's provocative, but it also is, extraordinarily entertaining.
Mhm.
So, I really at that point just sort of, said to Todd, like, "I'm all in, and whatever you wanna do, I wanna do it too."
Yeah.
So, um, and with Pam Koffler, she started out line producing for us.
Mhm.
And, we had this great year where we produced 3 films, one right after another, and the 3 films were Kids, I Shot Andy Warhol, and Stonewall. Literally,
Yeah.
we did one, rolled over to the next, rolled over to the next, and so it kind of gave us a year of stability, to actually kind of like we had an office that we had for the whole, usually, in a movie,
Yeah.
you pack up your office and off
Absolutely.
you go, and then the next movie comes along and you open up a new one. But we had the same office for a year. Were working with some of the same people, and so we started to actually develop a little. Like we
Hmm.
started being like, people would drop off a script and see if we were interested in it, and during that time, it sort of gave us a little bit of breathing room and to think about the ways in which Pam and I work together. And it just started to become very clear that that we had different enough skill sets, uh, that a partnership made sense.
Yeah.
I think we also just are like, by nature, both of us are extremely loyal, and
Right.
we've had our ups and downs, as any partnership does, but it never occurred to us during those ups and downs that the solution was to dissolve,
Right.
you know? So and now, it's sort of like, it's one of those like, I don't think, I mean, she's usually my first call every morning,
Hmm.
or I'm hers. Um, and, it's one of the greatest things, one of my greatest achievements is that
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, and it's why I ask about it because I think, like I said, in this time we're in, it feels so transient and it feels like FOMO and the next shiny new thing. People seem to, uh, loyalty doesn't seem to be as a priority as I think it should be, and I think it's changing with the shift of priorities. But as
Right.
someone who has not just with your producing partner, but then with the creative, right, with the filmmaker and Todd Haynes, like over 3 decades of, like you said, the ups and downs of projects and failures and heartbreak and personal stuff that always gets in the way, like, to still sustain that 30 years later
Mhm.
is a
Yep.
wonderful accomplishment akin to the 100 plus films you've produced, and so for those that are looking to find their Todd and their Pamela, what is that thing that they should be looking for?
It's one of those things that's really like, it when you find it,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess for a director, it's not only are you looking for a director whose vision you feel like you can really get behind, but somebody who you feel like you can be added value to. It's like at this point, Todd knows that I have his back, in a way that allows him to really do his best work,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and I can it's almost like, uh, like I can tell almost immediately this will work for him and that won't.
Yeah.
Like, like this will not be a situation that he'll thrive in, or this will be,
Mm.
in terms of potential, uh, other collaborators, in terms of, location, like just kind of the whole.
The whole thing, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, coming up looking for those people, right? I shared my own experience as an example of a lot of broken hearts, and it's very similar to dating, right? Because essentially you're in a marriage with a creative partnership, a business with these people, and we all want to find our right hand, our core group of collaborators that are forever. But I had a lot of heartbreaks of thinking I had found those people and being very authentic and sort of giving of myself and my heart, even though at that time you're still learning, right? In my early 20s, I was still figuring shit out. And that got taken advantage of quite often, where I would help develop something. And at the time, it would be like a short film that I was helping put together. And the moment we got the script to a place that was good, the moment it was great, then that filmmaker would take the script to the manager, and the manager's like, great, let's get an A-list and let's take this to a different producer. And you get left behind. And after so many of those blows, right, it's really challenging to still keep getting up. And so, like, obviously now 30 years later, you've built this trust where it's secondhand. But in the beginning, I wonder if maybe you did have some of these false starts with some people that don't make it into your books, who kind of don't matter anymore. But
Very well may have. I mean,
yeah.
you know, look, there's there's certain projects that I felt we had, put our handprints on,
Yeah.
and that got taken away from us and taken to bigger producers. That certainly happened. But you develop a very thick skin,
Yeah.
and we're very prolific. I think producers sort of have to be.
Right.
I mean, look, that report just came out from Dear Producer about how
Mhm.
unsustainable
Yes.
producing is.
Exactly.
And it's really it's depressing. It's
Yeah.
really like, but I also feel like there's a you have to think like an entrepreneur, and you have to constantly be seeking opportunity
Mhm.
in, um, right now there's got to be opportunity in this disruption. Disruption brings opportunity. Even while it destroys some, it brings some. And, figuring out your way through to finding that opportunity it's almost like a whole other layer to, there's development, there's physical production, there's, creative production, etc. But there's that whole other piece, which I don't know if people are really, you know, if people are really teaching, or if you really can. I mean, I know somebody said producing can be learned, but it can't be taught.
Mm.
And I've always thought that I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at
Yeah.
when I, tell kids not to bother with film school. Although I run an MFA program at
Yeah.
CU, which tries very hard to, if it can't teach it, it tries to model it
Right.
and model it as effectively as possible.
And do you feel like it's been successful?
Yes, I do. I mean, I feel it's also an affordable MFA program.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a giant difference.
Mhm.
And I think that what we tried to do is create as many experiences for our MFAs where they get in close proximity now, virtually, of course, with industry professionals
Yeah.
in ways that are sometimes overwhelming, like a ton of information and a ton of different points of view, but to me kind of mirrors the chaos
Right.
that is this business, because things change so quickly. I found myself on phone calls sometimes not having any clue what people were talking.
Yeah.
When I first delved into the world of foreign sales, it took me, I could barely understand, what it meant to buy a territory, and what that money was against,
Mm.
and how people got it back, and all of that stuff that just seems like old hat to me now.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes it's that kind of, you know, uh, bombardment that helps you figure out
Yeah.
what the world really is.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts on that. I think having done over 50 of these incredible conversations now, the one thing I've learned is that, to your point, like there is a certain DNA of the kind of person that is drawn to this line of work, that is drawn to this business, that is drawn to independent producing specifically versus the people that go up some of the other tracks, that, to your point, isn't something that can be taught. Either you're wired for it or you're not. And even in
Right.
my sort of coming up and having people under me who had that hunger, there's still that, the same way that I think stars have that je ne sais quoi quality, I feel
Right.
like producers also have that thing that is just, they're wild enough to believe that they can make the impossible possible. I don't know.
Right.
And they find a way, time and time again, So yeah, like you can pick up a book and learn a lot of stuff. You can even be on set, but it really isn't for everybody. And one of my questions was about the financial aspect of this, because that was one of the things, right? That misconceptions about producers is that we're all rich and we're all making all the money and all we do is hang out with celebrities. And you have like your great example from your book with 1 Hour Photo that made millions and millions, and you don't ever see any of that back end. And that example has not changed since that time. It's still very much the case. And so I've often wondered, how does one sustain a life? How does one create longevity in this business as an independent film producer financially? And obviously, you having been in it for now as long as you have, I'm curious how you've navigated that for yourself, because you're still here. You're still Still at it.
No, I mean, I guess, some of it's luck. Some
Yeah.
of it, there's a lot of right place, right time,
Mm-hmm.
that, some of it is simply naivete. Like, you know, I think sometimes when you don't know, it's hard.
Right.
You're a little bit more fearless um, you know, uh, it's, it, it's a difficult question. I think being prolific, being flexible, I think really, never saying, "Oh, we'll never do X, Y, or Z." I was at Sundance Producers Conference, which took place then in the summer, um, many, many years ago when the Blair Witch Project opened to giant numbers on
Mm-hmm.
like Friday night. And so it was Saturday morning and everyone was looking at, uh, it was looking at the numbers, getting the box office reports, probably by fax, probably that long ago. And Blair Witch was the first digital film to, do something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember being on a panel with a bunch of producers who all took a very, lofty, well, that's not film. That's not filmmaking. That's not, I would never do that.
Mm,
Like their first impulse was to preserve the old instead of to embrace the new.
yeah.
And I think you gotta embrace the new.
Yeah.
That said, I probably make more movies on film than any other producer or director. Keep insisting on it. Uh, but I think that Killer has always tried very hard. Like, oh, okay, that's a new way to do things. Like, how
Yeah.
do we get into it?
Yeah.
You know,
What is it about you think that you've molded yourself into this very pragmatic person? You seems like you're not tethered to identities that maybe you've had in the past, to accolades or to labels people have given you, right? Like now you call yourself a content producer. You're not married to, no, I'm a this producer and I will only like you seem to just be always rolling with the punches and like you said, just growing with the times and not getting too caught up on how things were because there's always a new school of thought. What is it about you think that just keeps you that flexible?
I don't know. I mean,
It's not conscious. You don't think?
no, I think it's just, I'm an opportunist. Um, I'm pragmatic. I'm an opportunist. I'm a bit of a hustler. Uh, you know, um, I like I like things to feel. I like to not repeat experiences. I like it when a movie teaches me something new or a TV series teaches me something new. I used to say the great thing about, filmmaking is you always learn something you didn't know you had to know and that you'll never need to know again. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, go down some rabbit hole so that a director, so you can figure out, you know, how to make an animal do something or how to make that effect happen,
Right.
and then never do that again. But you've learned how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. You mentioned earlier we were talking about uncertainty, right? This idea of uncertainty in the business. And there's a great quote from your book where you say that people have this fear, right? That admitting uncertainty means admitting weakness.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, how does one combat that fear in an industry that's built on perception most of the time?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I would say most successful first time directors are successful because they know what they don't know and, you know, surround themselves with people who do know what they don't know.
Mhm.
Um, I That's in a way sort of one of the high compliments that Pam and I would pay to, if there's a director that we want to work with, who doesn't have a ton of experience, we'll say, oh, they know what they aren't afraid to say what they don't
Mhm.
know. So, um, I mean, it's, I don't live in LA, and I think one of the things that's great about living in New York is it's not a company town. Or, some people would say, oh, yes, it is. It's finance, but it's not my company town. And I would meet people at, back when there were dinner parties or parties who they'll ask me what I do. And when I tell them, they'll say, oh, I haven't seen a movie in 5 years, or they'll say, have you done anything I've ever heard of? And I'll say, well, Still Alice won an Oscar. And they'll go, no, never heard of it. It's just it keeps you kind of like, well, there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And, if I lived in LA, I think I'd be probably a lot more aware of what was happening in the industry that I was or wasn't a part of.
Hmm. Interesting. So you don't feel like your, I don't want to say self-worth, but your contributions as a person, is that super tied up in your producing identity? Meaning, a lot of producers, myself included, have been a victim, right, to getting affected by comparison. And like, you finish a thing you've invested your whole life in for months, for years. You finish the thing, and the industry's like, "Good job. What's the next thing?" And you're like, "Holy shit! Like, I just barely I'm getting my bearings after devoting all of myself to this one thing." And it can kind of just really wear you down, right, to continue the grind of it. Has that ever impacted you?
I mean, that's like a ask me 20 years ago question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like now at my level of experience and my age, I just don't think about it.
Yeah.
You know, I look, if there's a competitive situation, and this happens to us all the time, and a director goes with a different producer, I'm upset. I'm angry, um, for 5 minutes.
Right.
And then I usually say to them and mean it, come back to us, you know, come back to us if it doesn't work out, or come back to us with the next one,
Yeah.
and good luck. And, I mean, there's certain producers who just have backing money behind them that's eclipses what we have. And the fact that they can, go out and really snatch something away from us is, it's a drag. But some people could say that about me.
Right. Right. Right.
I've taken, projects away from people um, who were as enthusiastic as I was about it. It's just it's part of the business.
You've also said that, you don't often look back and feel nostalgic about the work you've done. You rarely go back and to look at your films unless you're looking for a department head's name that you worked with. So how do you then stay focus on the present and what's here now, but also constantly thinking ahead? Like, every producer I know who's successful has to find that balance for themselves of like, today, the present, this is all you can control, but having forward momentum.
I think we've got a pretty big slate. And I think every day it's a question of like, what can I do to advance this project forward? Is it a call to an agent?
Yeah.
Is it doing notes? Uh is it, doing a list of potential department heads? It's just very, it's very pragmatic. It's just like, I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot when we are trying to figure out whether to get behind a project or not is this whole notion of makeability. What makes something makeable?
Hmm.
And it's sort of a combination of the story itself, or the story, the script, whatever, the filmmaker, uh, the potential for talent to attach, and this whole notion of like, is it something people want to see? And we don't always guess right. But we have a pretty good track record of guessing right. I mean, Still Alice is a good example because that was, that was based on a best-selling book, so it wasn't like we were pulling some obscure,
Yeah.
but it's I remember when we were doing it,
Mm.
people, I would say to people, "Oh, we're doing a movie on Still. Oh, that's the Alzheimer. I can't see that." And then they would proceed to explain to me why it was too close to them, because of a parent or a sibling or whatever. So, Still Alice, it's a bummer, basically. It's like
Yeah.
it doesn't end with her getting better.
Right.
So that was all about, a great filmmaking team, obviously, Wash Westmoreland and Richard Glatzer, but also, and then of course, Julianne, but it was also about a performance being as extraordinary as it was, that, would compel people to, give them some sense of urgency of seeing it. And then also the fact that Alzheimer's has touched everybody. It really
Yeah.
has. It's very hard to find somebody who doesn't at least say, my friend, and usually it's like, my wife, my grandfather, my whatever. So those two things gave us the sense like this is makeable and sellable.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you're right. Like I watched that film and it still very much resonates with me, even though I actually have not been personally affected by Alzheimer's yet, and knock on wood, but I am a junkie for the human experience. It's why I'm in this. Like, I want to know and be deep on the inside of worlds and experiences that I'll never get to have. Even if I got to live a million lives, I still wouldn't get to do half of the things that we get to experience, right? Through documentaries, through these beautiful narrative films. And so I am one that leans into all of the shit of life. Like I'm hungry for it. And like, it's why I'm here. I remember I would go to see a movie and I would be the person just crying hysterically at the end because I was just so moved by the experience, and I would look to like my dad that I went to see a movie with and he's like, yeah, so she dies. That sucks. And it just, which is like, of course, a very pragmatic sort of like encapsulation of the experience. But I just would physically not even be able to move for a while because that's how much I felt, you know? And I would remember walking down the steps and thinking, wow, like I want to create the kind of work that makes someone feel like that one day. It doesn't have to be this depressing, sinking feeling because of an experience. It can be through laughter. It can be through whatever means necessary. But to make people feel something and have a reaction, like, period. I think that's why we get to do this work, right? And I also think that things find people when they're ready as well. I think that's the beauty of films existing in a capsule that is there to be discovered whenever versus live performance, which is a very collective experience. So I want to switch gears a little bit to this idea of self-care, which I ask a lot of my guests about. And when I was doing some research on you, I found this really great interview where you talk about that you unwind with procedural shows. And you have this great quote where you said, give me Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, and a bottle of wine, and I'm good. So the questions are, what kind of wine is your go-to? Any kind of rosé, or are you bougie like me?
Actually, one thing that I have not been able to do since last March, but what I sort of got some more internet notoriety for than producing, I started to write reviews of airport lounges,
Oh,
specifically the wine.
interesting.
So it's not hard to find out quite a bit about the kind of wine I like by going to my old social media posts.
Yeah.
So I like a light Provençal rosé, which is actually, this is the time of year when it's hardest to find.
Yeah.
But it will be, coming back within a month or so.
Nice.
Yep, that's what I like.
Do you have any particular brands, or are you just, as long as it's from that region, you're pretty open to it?
It depends. I mean, I'm not going to name any particular brand, but I like a lot of them.
Yeah. So, and what is it about procedurals that you enjoy? Which I think a lot of people will find that fact surprising.
I think there's something, uh, if you're a narrative junkie, which I kind of am, they kind of satisfy that like they're like a snack,
Mm,
it's and some of the plotting on SVU is really quite remarkable. It's not all remarkable,
yeah.
but some of it really is. And there's also something about the ability to breathe life and interest into something that's been around for that many years that I find kind of admirable.
Yeah, it's true. It's really yeah, you're right. It's remarkable that it's been around for so long, and not only that, that it's been a career starter for a lot of people. A lot of people get their first opportunities on there. It's impressive. Um, that's funny about the procedurals. So then, navigating the ups and downs of your careers, it sounds like it seems like from what you're saying, you just stay focused in the moment, in the present, and looking forward. You don't get too bogged down with the things that maybe don't go so well. You're just kind of over that hump of your career, it sounds like, which is fantastic. Um,
Well, I mean, no one sets out to make a bad movie or a bad show.
yeah.
And sometimes things don't turn out as well as you hoped they would. And sometimes the public or the critics don't react the way you wanted them to.
Mm,
And it's painful every single time,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
You worked really hard on something and it doesn't get the reception that you anticipated slash hoped for. It never gets easy, you know? But I do, because I'm forward looking, it's just like on to the next. And know that, things nowadays, especially, they get to have second lives. I mean, when Todd Haynes made Safe many million years ago,
Mm,
that movie did not get a very strong critical or public reception. It it really people scratched their heads. They didn't really know what to make of it. Uh, in 2000, the Village Voice did a poll of all the critics that they could find of what was the best movie of the 90s. And it was Safe.
interesting.
Um, uh, and it was really interesting because if those critics had written good reviews of it, then people might have gone to see it.
Yeah.
They didn't. So they didn't. So just to say, like sometimes things need to sort of go on that like zeitgeist lazy Susan and come back to later.
Yeah.
And just and get rediscovered.
Yeah. It's a really good point. Um, so as we wrap up, because we are almost at the hour, I just want to be mindful of your time. I have a couple more questions for you. Obviously, you've had an incredible career, very illustrious and lauded career. Would you be able to sort of pick three highlights, or is that like a really tall order?
Um, I mean, like highlights that are sort of obvious are like the first time I had a film in competition at Cannes, which was
Mm,
Velvet Goldmine. And, Velvet Goldmine was a game changer for me in a lot of ways because, um, I'd never worked on such an ambitious music driven film. And it was a real absolute example of like, it's a lot better to go into those things knowing nothing. You don't
yeah.
know be afraid.
Yep.
Uh, Showing Go Fish
Mm,
to an almost all-female audience at the London Gay Lesbian Film Festival. Um, and I just remember the movie ended, and there was this moment of silence, and then the room just exploded. That was pretty great. Um, taking Poison to the Berlin Film Festival and really learning, uh, you know, um, uh, how movies worked in an international marketplace. Um, Going to the Oscars for the first time, which was actually in the Velvet Goldmine, which had been nominated for a costume.
yeah.
And we went because Sandy Powell was nominated for Shakespeare in Love and Velvet Goldmine. And I said to her, "Did you get 2 tickets or 4 tickets?" And she said, "Oh, I only got 2." But then she opened up the envelope and there were 4 tickets.
Yeah.
She
And you have to
gave
go.
the other 2 to me and Todd. And you know, I mean, look, every movie sort of has its, you know, I could switch to, you know, the past few years and easily, you know, showing Zola at the Sundance Film Festival.
Yeah. Very excited
Um,
for that one.
it's just,
Yeah.
you know, and which was just extraordinary. And showing Shirley there too. You know, I guess the last time I was physically in Sundance, going to the Venice Film Festival, which I did in September with The World to Come in the middle of the pandemic,
Wow.
was, you know, an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah.
So that's a few.
What do you love most about producing?
You know, putting the movie in front of an audience.
Yeah. That's the moment for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And I mean, so you've done so much. Is what's left for you to accomplish, like in terms of, is there one thing that you're like, one day I still hope to do this?
I don't really think that way.
Yeah.
You know, I get asked a lot about like what directors on your bucket list, and I don't really, you know, it's more when it organically,
Yeah.
this is the project and that's the right director. I mean, we brought a script to Robert Altman and he decided to direct it. And it wasn't like it was my lifelong dream, but it was also an extraordinary experience. He was the right person for it. And he decided to do it, and we got to produce his second class film.
Yeah. That's awesome. So you don't have this secret desire, for example, like one day you want to produce a musical or revive something that
No. I would say the only thing is I have really been, and we have a couple project or 2 in the works. I really want to tell a story about what happened in New York City during the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I lived it. It had a profound effect on my life,
Yeah.
on my career, and I don't feel like I've seen it yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's something that, you know, I noodle on a lot.
Yeah. You've been very transparent, at least in your books, about, you know, how many friends you lost at that time and how scary that time was. And I think it's true that unless you lived it, it's sort of an era that is just not forgotten about. But to your point, there's only a few movies, and all of those movies, I don't think, from what you're saying, really capture what that time was like for most people.
I mean,
Yeah.
Finally, it's probably the one that I was the most scornful of when it came out, but probably really does capture a lot of it, was Longtime Companion.
Mm.
And of course, the first narrative film I really worked on was Parting Glances,
Yeah.
which I think also captures it to some degree. But those movies, you know, uh, at the time I felt they were really about, you know, upper middle class white men, and
Right.
they still are about that.
Yeah.
It's not like they transformed, but I have more compassion for them now
Yeah.
than I did at the time where I thought that was not my role.
Yeah. Yeah, and also how the stigmatization of HIV, like one of my best friends is HIV positive, and he's not a filmmaker, not in the film business anymore, but he's dedicated his life now to destigmatizing what it means to be a person who's positive and gets to live, you know, a healthy life. Because a lot of people still, when they hear those words, they flash back to that era that was very scary. But yeah, how much has changed and how it is possible to have a good
Sure.
life, good quality of life now. Yeah, that's incredible. I'll definitely be watching from the sidelines as you accomplish that goal. Is there one piece of advice you were given early in your career that actually helped you, that stuck with you?
Honestly, the best piece of advice I think is I'm stealing this from, now I forgot his name, the guy who was the manager of the Yankees, uh,
Oof.
which is just, you know, work hard and be on time.
Yeah.
You know, being on time to not be overestimated,
Especially
especially in
nowadays.
business. And
Yeah.
I tell it to, you know, new people who are new on set all the time. Like, if you can do that, then everything else will fall into place.
I know, right? Yeah.
Being late is just the worst.
It's the worst, yeah, for sure. I agree with that. It's really smart, simple, but can be hard to do. A lot of people struggle with that. Final question for you. Do you have a legacy you hope to leave behind? Is that
Well, I
something
think
you
it's
think
just
about?
all the movies, right? Just all the
Yeah.
time.
Well,
So
besides of your work, I think just you as Christine Vachon, the producer, there's killer films and everything you've accomplished with your team there. But I would venture to say that you, as the individual producer, you have a legacy of your own, and definitely a name that,
I hope so. I mean, I
yeah,
hope, look, some of the things I'm very proud of is I feel, we eh, we made an effort to try and not just work with female directors, but also try to bring more women behind the camera too. I
mhm,
mean, we gave both Maryse Alberti and Ellen Curris their first narrative shooting jobs,
yeah,
and I'm really, really proud of that.
yeah.
You know, so we just keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, that's all any of us can do, but
Exactly.
I just wanna thank you for been trying for 30 plus years and, continuing to be an inspiration to many and to, I hope, a new generation of filmmakers and producers coming up under me even that are gonna discover you and all the work you've done so far and continue to be inspired by you and everything you've done. So thank you so much
My
for the
pleasure. Thank
time,
you.
and yeah, thank you so much.
Take care.